Hey guys, Necroman back with yet another video. I know I said I wasn't going to make any more videos for a while, but I came up with a really cool idea. I want to show you guys, and this is a work in progress. But as I come up with ideas for this build and this class and everything, I kind of want to share them because some of this stuff is kind of fun and exciting. Now I'm going to jump right into a random 71 and just show you the changes that I've made to the build. And you guys can decide for yourselves if you think this is something you want to explore or if you're happy with the current explosive Shadow Mist build. I was getting kind of bored with it against single target, so I went ahead and made some changes, and I'll talk about them in the gear when this run is over, but I want to just show you the gameplay differences now so you can see how it plays and decide what you think, because you might love it or you may hate it. One thing you're going to notice immediately as we're doing this, we crit a lot more now. And if you watch some of these crit things, you're going to start seeing some big numbers actually popping up in the mix. Keep an eye out when I'm in full god mode, in blight mode, and everything else with flesh eater going, like all the things right here. I still pretty much use the same rotation. I still use the same skills. When you pop Grasping Veins to pop that aspect, that's when a lot of the big numbers will really start popping up. You may have seen a 1.2 million crit right there on that guy. So this is the interesting thing. I had this shower thought when I was pretty much taking a break from the game about what if I tried to focus on making the Shadowblights as big a procs as possible. Because one of the things I noticed while playing the build a lot is every now and then, even though I wasn't focused on crit, I would see these sneaky high crits popping in. Sometimes 100k, sometimes even 150 to 200k. And anybody that understands multiplicative properties will understand that getting to 200k, you're really not that far away from a million or 2 million or anything else. I mean, once you start getting into those kind of numbers, the multiplicative properties can take you to big numbers very, very quickly. So the fact that I was already hitting six figures without actually even being focused on spec for crit was very interesting to me. I probably shouldn't hit this. This is going to just be a bad example, but I can't help it. If I see a conduit, I have to do it, right? I just have to. So the pros and cons of this build, as I've mentioned before, are survivability and mobility. And the build still has that. But one of the problems that the build always lacked, that a lot of people talk about, is the single target damage isn't that great. The more enemies you have on the screen, the more enemies you can pool together for the Shadowblight and Corpse Explosion pool damage, and stack with corpses in Black River and all these other things. Yeah, that feels good. That feels strong. You can melt packs. But then when you get down to like single elites, powerful elites that survive the pack, or have things like Vampiric and accidentally bite you, or bosses, or all these other things, these elements can slow the build down. Let's say people ask me, well, what do you do to deal with it? And I just say persist. You basically just have to deal with it. You have to endure and get the hits in and just play right and just dodge effects until you can actually get the kill. But the question is, if you can get crit like this without having to worry about how many pools the enemy is standing in, it opens the door to a more interesting flow of being able to fight single targets without having to worry about how many corpses are necessarily generated around them. More corpses are still going to make it easier, obviously. It's going to mean that you have more pools going, ticking more ticks, which means more Shadowblight procs. But when you get down to a single target, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're dead in the water. It also means that the ranged enemies that like to run out of your pools, you can kind of keep heat on them and follow them around while still applying the vulnerable from the Grasping Veins and doing the single target damage with the Shadowblight procs to melt them down pretty quickly. Now, it is still a little bit of a ramp-up damage class. You're waiting on Blight. You're waiting on, your other buffs like Flesh Eater and all this other stuff. But it still seems pretty strong, and I'm actually really enjoying it. I've not completely given up on Corpse Explosion as my main vessel of damage, but I've also toned down how focused I am on it, which, again, we'll go over in a minute when I'm done this run so I can show you the gear. But this is the Mach 2, I believe, of this build, and I kind of really like it. And I have a lot of room in my gear to grow. I have some areas to still explore. There are versions of the build that I think you could modify for pushing versus speeds. Right now, I'm actually in more of a push build, which isn't really logical given that I'm in 70. I mean, as you notice, I'm not really taking much damage from these goobers. They're not really in a threat of killing me here. So wasting my time in a push build for this, probably not the best. The only reason I'm in a push build and haven't changed it is because I don't really have the essences or the secondary items required to make the backups to switch between the push and the farm essences. Ideally, I would need 2 pairs of gloves, I would need 2 pairs of boots, and I would need 2 helmets. And I simply do not have that right now. Boots are not that difficult to get. Helmets are very difficult to get in the way that I want them. And gloves, obviously, anybody who's tried to get or buy or farm for from the trade market, I mean, when I say buy, the lucky hit and crit gloves, that's obviously very difficult too. And I say that because, yes, I am actually not using any uniques in this build. So that's the good news and the bad news. The good news is you're not at the mercy of looting Black River. You're not at the mercy of getting a Howl from Beyond. The bad news is your crit stats, the rolls you get on that gear, are very, very, very important. So while you can get away with not having those uniques, you do still need really, really well-rolled gear. So pros and cons to that. You might want to just use the current explosive mist like I am while you work up on building this. If you wanted to try this version of the build. Let's see what we get here. Anything good? Oh, well, there was that. Whoops. Can happen to anybody. And that's why we don't play hardcore. All right. So we still need one more of these goobers real quick. Yeah, it's pretty laid back. I still move pretty quick. I don't really have to worry about damage from anybody on this difficulty. It's a very smooth, easy grind. I can kill the elite packs very smoothly. I mean, stuff like that just melts. It goes about as quick as the old build. And that's the thing. There's upsides with very little downsides for me. Like the damage, like I said earlier in the original video, the gameplay content, it was a little disingenuous because Blind Burrows is a very, very good dungeon for that build. So showing gameplay footage and damage numbers while being in Blind Burrows, it's going to give you a false expectation of what you can reasonably expect on a more regular basis while playing Explosive Shadow Mist. The damage is good. It's totally fine. Your defenses are through the roof. Survivability is there. I mean, there's a reason why it was able to do Nightmare 100. But if you're looking for something with a little more oomph and speed and clearing damage, you know, then for me personally, something like this I think is more appealing. And look at those numbers. It's just fun again. It feels good to see the big crits again. It was something I missed. It's just fun to have the big crits, right? Oh, that was actually in the dungeon. Okay, I didn't even have a boss. You can kind of use your imagination how it would go for the boss, but... Alright, so we're going to grab that. We'll grab that. And then we'll level up this. Because we're never ending leveling up a lot of these useful ones. Okay, let's talk about the actual gear changes now that you've seen the way it plays. And you've seen the crit and the playstyle. So... obvious concept here. We're all in on Shadowblight procs. And while I haven't completely specced out of giving a shit about Corpse Explosion for damage, I have done some things like remove it from my pants. By not focusing as much on my Corpse Explosion damage, it allows me to put my DR through the roof. I'm gilled out like crazy with damage resistant stuff now. I have it on my chest 4 of 4. I have it on my pants 4 of 4. Like, this is nutty, right? And I still have room to grow. I only have a 45. When I put the 50 roll on my amulet and changed my chest to might, I wiped out a 50 roll on my chest at the time, and I haven't even replaced it yet. So I'm only rocking a 45 on my chest right now. But one of the cool things about opening up the glove, so these gloves right now, again, I'm testing things out. These gloves have a perfect lucky chance and a perfect crit strike. But other than that, I mean, they rolled strength on them, which is just armor for us. And I was trying out the lucky hit chance to heal to see how the proc was. There was a rumor that these up to a chance lucky procs proc far less frequently than Decrepify or the Hewed Flesh. And so far in testing, I want to say it's probably true. It doesn't feel great. I mean, even at a 5%, I don't know. It would be procking like what? Like right now, my lucky hit on this is 63. So it would be something like, you know, it's not a 1 in 20. It's obviously much higher or lower than that. So I don't know. Maybe it's working properly. Maybe it is the rarity. Some people are claiming that if it has the lucky chance up to a lucky chance hit or whatever, basically it's dividing your lucky hit chance across each tick. And the reason that this ticks per tick regularly is because Decrepify and Hewed Flesh have different wording on their lucky hit effects. It says enemies hit while affected. Huge Flesh says damage done. Your damage has up to a chance. So the wording on those is different than the up to a blank chance on the other effects. And these effects proc much, much less. That's why this passive that you see over here, you're going to see this far, you know, less frequently and all that. So there are videos on YouTube about this that you can find. People that have gone in depth. I think it's a topic that I'm very interested in to fully understand more of, because if this is true, and these chance to hit lucky procs aren't great for this build, then what I said in my previous video about Doombringer being the nuts, I actually might have to walk back on that. Doombringer might not be that nuts. If it's that rare to proc, we would have to see just how rare the 25% chance on this type of effects proc. I think it would still be pretty good. When I'm fighting enemies, I see this 5% not super frequently, but if it was 5 times as often on a perfect 25% Doombringer roll, I'm probably pretty comfortable with the reliability of that. So the jury's out. We'll see. But for as far as rings go, right now I've got crit strike, vulnerable damage, lucky hit chance, and maximum life. Basically, the only difference I made in the gearing here is I got rid of the slot bucket damage, and I put in crit strike chance on both of my rings. Now I also have some backup rings here, which rotate out the maximum life in favor of crit damage. So when I said that there's a push build versus a speed build, basically what you would change is you would not worry about having might on your helmet, which, by the way, I'll jump around a couple and talk about a few things before I talk about that. Hold on. So might on the helmet, because why not? This is our poor man's Shaco now. It literally has cooldown reduction. It gives maximum life. It gives a 20% damage reduction whenever I use it. This is basically poor man's Shaco to a T. It doesn't give the +4 skills, but otherwise it's basically the same item. I mean, it's providing everything but the skills. And what's funny is in this build, I actually don't care about the +4 skills. I could loot a Shaco right now, and if it rolled as badly as the ones that we've seen other people roll, aka 4.4% cooldown and a low damage reduction, I would not use it over this helmet because I don't care about the +4 on my skills as much. Shadowblade is doing all of the damage for me right now. So it's pretty funny, but this is, to me, personally, better than a bad rolled Shaco. Go figure. Good thing that they're a 1 in 300 million drop, right? Great design. I personally hate that system. There are some people that defend it. I'm just going to go on the record right now and say I think those items are too rare. I'm totally fine with rare. I played the shit out of Diablo 2. I get it. I was 17 years old trying to find a win force. I've lived that life. I understand rare items. But these are so rare as to a point of being like, I don't know. I've never seen anything like it. Even games like PoE with mirror drops, one of those will drop every few days for people. You know, we're on a level of rarity with this game, especially given that they can roll as bad as they can. It's ridiculous to me. Like, how heartbreaking would it be to loot a Shaco and then have it get bad stats, right? But we're off topic. Let's stay on focus here. So by having this with Might, I was able to move Explosive Mist to my gloves because these can actually use offensive and utility skills there. It's a very powerful slot that we've now opened up by being able to get rid of Hell from Below. In addition to that, by not using Black River, I was able to get Grasping Veins. Now, my understanding of Grasping Veins and the reason this is so powerful for Necros is on first glance, when I first just kind of skimmed this, I wasn't using it because I was in a full dot build. You deal 60% bonus critical strike damage to enemies damaged by corpse tendrils. It's obviously very strong, but I missed that gray X in the brackets. I never noticed that gray X. This is actually a true multiplier. I, for the longest time, thought this 60% damage was just additive to my crit damage bucket. I never noticed the gray X. This is actually a raw multiplicative bonus. And you might be watching this being like, well, duh, yeah, everybody knew that. I didn't know that. I had never played with this. I had never given it that much effort because I've been an Explosive Shadow Mist my whole life. So knowing that and understanding why all these bone bills are critting for as much as they're critting for, it makes so much more sense to me now. Because a 60% actual multiplier on top of everything else is very, very powerful. So for a single aspect to provide 20% crit chance and then another 60% multiplier, it really is necessary in this build and pulls the whole thing together. It's very, I would say it's probably one of the single strongest aspects in the entire game. It is very, very good for what it provides. And I'm able to put that on a ring and then move this to Bone Storm. Now you might be asking, well, why'd you put this on ring? I probably would have put this on an offhand. I value the slots that I feel are the rarest to get good rolls on. I try to put the better, harder to get aspects on those spots. And foolishly, I probably should have saved this and not put this on a ring. I should have put a lower quality and saved my perfect roll and waited for a really, really good focus. Now, the focus I'm using right now is cooldown reduction, crit strike chance, lucky hit, damage reduction from enemies that are affected by shadow over time. I think this is the quad. This is the nuts. This is what I like. My only hesitation on this particular piece, despite the fact that it rolled absolutely amazing, thank you, Trade Market, is the eye level is a little low. I would like to get this up to like an 805 or an 810 minimum. So I'm only using a 38% Shadowblight right now. Obviously, the 40 is great, but I don't have it on this item because I didn't want to invest too heavily in this item. Even though it has great stats, the secondaries are amazing. It is only a 785, and I hope to find better. I would trade a couple points in efficiency on any of these secondaries. If I could find a higher eye level, I think it would be worth it. But you have the crit strike on these, you have the crit strike on that, you have the crit strike damage on all of these pieces. And now you have Grasping Veins in the mix. You can incorporate Might. And as far as the farming build goes, you go to this and you look. So I have backup rings that I've traded for from the market that are, I added vulnerable to these. This would be what I would swap to if I was swapping to a speed build. I haven't enchanted this yet. I haven't worked on this yet. But vulnerable, crit strike chance, lucky hit, crit strike damage. This isn't going to be new to anybody that plays a crit-based build. But you would switch to this with the equivalent of these if you were switching to a farm build. You'd want to put on straight crit. You could afford the health. You're not going to worry about health because keep in mind, you just watched that 70. My health wasn't really at risk most of the time. So if I was doing content where I'm not going to be dying, I could happily swap out this health in favor of that. If I was doing higher push content and I needed the survivability, that's when I bust out the max health rings. Now, what this means to me is probably what I should have done here, and I'm going to have to rework some stuff, is Ultimate Shadow and Blood Mist. These should be the ones that I keep on my rings at all times, because if I'm going to be swapping these, then these need to be the ones that are the least valuable. And even though it's nice to get high damage Bone Storm, Ultimate Shadow, and Blood Mist, the damage on these is not that important. This is obviously not a major source of our damage. It ticks very low. It's a vessel for getting the ticks to cause the Shadow Blights, but the overall damage this is causing is such an insignificant amount of our total DPS that just slapping this on the two rings and then going back and forth with those is going to make the most sense. This Grasping Veins should have been on my weapon, and the Shadow Blade on offhand is probably fine. So what's going to end up happening at some point is I'm going to have to loot more of these. I'm going to have to imbue my weapon. And this weapon is totally fine. I mean, I don't necessarily think I'm going to need to get rid of this. I mean, 812 is completely reasonable. 28.5 on the vulnerable and the crit strike damage. Decent all stats and a decent int roll. I mean, this is a totally passable weapon. I would upgrade the eye level a bit and maybe the secondaries, but otherwise this is about as good as it's going to get. Boots right now get a little interesting because Corpse Tendrils is back on the menu. And the reason for that is, again, I'm currently testing this, but if I do get rid of the Corpse Explosion Focus, like I'll still keep it in the rotation. I look hideous, by the way. What happened to my pants? Why is it not? Yeah, this is what I'm supposed to look like, right? So why do I look like a goofball? Why is it? That's weird. Oh, I didn't even notice that was an icon. Cool. I didn't know you could do that. Interesting. Just learned that right here on this video. Neat. Okay, anyhow. So this is still the amulet I was using before. This currently has corpse skills, fueled by death, movement speed, cooldown reduction. Now, I'm kind of interested in an amulet like the one I was using for my push build. Where did I put it? Where'd it go? Am I blind? Why don't I see it? Oh, here it is. So something like this is interesting to me. This is what I used in my push build video when I cleared 100. I still have my 75% roll on this. Terror, corpse skills, damage, cooldown. I'm thinking about rolling corpse skills off of this because I don't care as much about the corpse damage. It's good for tendrils because it gives me the getting to the 5 of 5 break point for the diminishing returns, but it's really not a big deal to just throw the tendrils back on the boot. So by putting it back on the boot with a perfect move speed, int and all stats, this is basically fine. It's not my favorite. Like I have the boots here with the 25%. This gives me all stats int, movement speed for elites, and movement speed. I was using this for a while. These are obviously great too. Basically a perfect roll. Thank you, Trade Market. But I switched to this purely to get the tendrils back on as an experiment because I'm going to experiment with just taking corpse skills off the Ami. And I do think, I haven't rolled it yet because I wanted to be sure before I mess with this amulet because I do really like this amulet. I really like Terror passive. The cooldown isn't perfect, but it's not that big a deal. I checked. It's like fractions of a second difference by losing that cooldown. I'll live. The raw damage mitigation is obviously great. And I can roll that corpse into a variety of things, which makes the re-rolling possibilities fine. I think I would want armor percent the most. And keep in mind, this is a push amulet, which means I'm not going to put movement speed on this particular amulet for Nightmare 90 plus pushing. If I was trying to get another 100 video and I was using this, I would probably be swapping for armor percent. So if I do post a video of doing another 100, expect this amulet to be on my neck with that corpse rolled off. I'm not sure yet. But for pushing, you've got your might on your helmet. Now for speeds, to go back again to what you would change for speeds, we talked about how the rings, you could swap out the health for the crit damage. And then for the gloves, you could basically put Blood Mist back on your helmet. And then this opens up the door to adding whatever one of these you want. You could probably put the barrier one on there. You could put Edge Masters on there. You could basically put whatever raw offensive multiplier you wanted on your gloves in trade-off of might by putting Explosive Mist back on the glove. And then voila, now you've got another 25 anytime Bone Storm's up, making your hits even stronger for speed clearing. So I think that's pretty strong. I think, like I said, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to have having a pair of gloves and a head. Replacing the head is going to be very difficult, but if I can get another one for speed clearing, I will probably keep this one as my pumper push build because it's going to be really hard to beat this. But if I can get, it's funny, I actually had this one, I traded for this one, and I started enchanting it. I started enchanting this. This was going to be my replacement, right? It's not too bad. Cooldown reduction, max life, total armor. I didn't notice the Necromancer tag on it. There are random items in the game that just randomly have class-bound tags where you, like, at first I panicked and I was like, wait a minute, did Blizzard change the class swapping to ults? No, it's not that. It's just Necros and Sorcerers randomly have these helmets that drop that are apparently Necro only. Like, this is the one of them here, this type. Yeah, see, Necromancer. I saw it. It's that icon. That visual, for some reason, is limited to Necromancer. Go figure. So just kind of the bad beats roll that, as you can see, I rolled lightning resistance because I had swapped it over to my Sorcerer to roll the barrier while hit. And she, like, rolled it once and immediately came up with a Necro skill. And I was just like, blink, blink, what? And then that's when I noticed, oh, it's a Necro item. So if the item is a Necro item and you give it to your alt to re-roll stats, it will break the rules of if it's not possible to roll stats on the item other than stats for that particular class. It actually checks for class. Meaning, now to be fair, I didn't push this. I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't roll this a lot on the Sorcerer. I didn't try to put the lucky hit while barriered on this particular piece because I didn't want to waste the resources to do it. But that being said, the fact that as I was enchanting it, it immediately popped up with Necro-related skills told me that the enchanting was pulling from the Necro pool. Again, that could be wrong. It might still be able to do it. I'm just saying, this is anecdotal. It's not definitive. I believe you are not able to get the lucky hit while buried on a helmet that is labeled as Necromancer. So buyer beware. Do what you will with that information. So yeah, I think putting barrier damage on this Edgemaster or something else would be strong. You'd be able to move that explosive mist back to your helmet for speed farming. You'd get the crit damage there, whatever. Only other changes I made. Book of the Dead. Golem, now I have the crit damage. I got rid of the 10% life. So now we're all in there. Other two pretty much stayed the same. This is still giving vulnerable. This is still giving shadow, although you could make an argument to go to the crit strike chance. It's just my crit strike chance is so high as is when I'm in the full, Bone Storm, Corpse Tendrils with all the gear. I mean, my base crit chance right now is 45.7 before that. So with those two on, being at an 85%, I don't know. You could. I don't know. I'm not a math nerd. You could check the math on that of what's better, a raw multiplicative 15% or taking your crit chance from 85 to 90, whatever. I mean, maybe, I don't know. Maybe the crit strike's better. Someone can tell me in the comments. I'm too lazy to check that math. And then as far as skills go, I took this is still juice, but I was able to take 1 point out. I have this back up to 2 out of 3. Yeah, I got rid of this because I'm just tired of it not proccing. Everything else is pretty much the same. Even though I'm not going all in on Corpse Explosion anymore, I still think it would be pointless to remove the points in this. I kept the points in. And that's one other thing I want to talk about too. There's probably 2 versions of this you could make, okay? The push build, which does what I'm doing here, and goes all in on defenses and sacrifices Corpse Explosion completely. Or, for speed farming, you could still swap back to your Corpse Explosion pants that you were using for whenever that have the +4, purely to get the Corpse Explosion back on for speed farming, just because that damage can still be relevant. You could have that damage and have that ticking on the side on the smaller stuff for the speed stuff if you wanted to. But if you're trying to do content that's extremely difficult, if you're trying to clear 100 and you're going for your title and you wanted that DR to keep yourself alive and you're fine with killing taking a little longer as a result of the Corpse Explosion damage going a little less, I think this is a totally reasonable swap. But going back to swapping these to crit damage, getting rid of the HP, putting barrier on the gloves, putting explosive miss back on the boot, going back to +4 corpse explosion on the pants is an entirely reasonable option, which is why a neck like this with the corpse explosion, cooldown, fueled by death, and movement speed, an amulet like this is still going to be in my stash for that purpose as well, for switching to my speed build and throwing this on, just so I have that corpse skill damage there as well. Now, that being said, as far as Paragon goes, I did make just a couple changes. And they're not even that big a deal. I took Wither off. I'm not in love with Wither. And now that I don't care about the damage, by taking Wither off, I was allowed to sneak over here and grab these maximum life nodes. And honestly, I may find like 2 more points to grab this other one too, just like something randomly over here. That's pretty much the only change I made. And also, I watched a video where a guy was analyzing my Paragon board, and he talked about how I came over here for the poison resistance. It's absolutely not for the poison resistance. It's for the armor. I'm sure some of you guys probably caught on to that and noticed that very quickly, but armor is so good in this game that if I can get armor nodes, I'm pretty much going to find a way to get them because I value them very, very highly. So there's that. So yeah, that pretty much covers all the gear changing. What I'm working on right now is I'm working on getting a higher eye level focus with basically exactly the rolls you see here. This right here rolled at 50. I mean, let's just take a second to appreciate how this rolled, right? This is a perfect damage reduction, a perfect total armor, and a perfect damage reduction from distant. I rolled like my life savings of gold on this, trying to get a better damage reduction from enemies that are affected by damage over time, and I just could not get it. No matter what I tried to do, this is the best I could get, and believe me, I am so sick of how expensive rerolling in this game gets. And again, you'll see people defend the overcosted costs to reroll. Let me just show you something real quick, okay? Look, I'm not saying it needs to be cheap. I'm not saying it needs to be easy. I'm not saying it's something that everybody should be doing all the time. But when I go to enchant my item and I see that it costs me 28 million fucking gold just to take another RNG chance that's probably going to fail, like, are you kidding me? Do you not have any idea how much effort it took to reroll this as many times as I did, and I still didn't get it? This doesn't feel good, guys. This is not something I enjoy seeing. This doesn't make me feel good about the item. I have to give up on the item, which I don't like. This just gets so wildly disproportionate to the amount of gain you're getting by rolling something like this. Like 28 million? Come on. Maybe it should reset every like week or something. Like maybe there's some like weekly event. Remember in WoW when you'd have your weekly resets and like Tuesdays were always a big deal or whatever. Maybe there's like some thing when the weekly cash on the world boss resets. Maybe our cost to reroll resets or something. I don't know. That could be fair, right? It's fair for everybody. It just sucks. It just sucks to reach a point on an item where you know you're pretty much done and like you spent all this time and effort either like saving up gold to buy a baller item, or you got a really insane like drop to drop and then you just want to enchant it, and yeah, the costs get so debilitatingly high that you have no chance anymore. So, and that's honestly, I'm not even trying to rag on the game too much. I know I've bitched twice in this video. I want you to know those two things are honestly my two biggest gripes with this game. I hate the exponential cost to reroll, and I hate how rare the rare items really are. And again, there's counter arguments to be made, but I will argue those points till the cows come home. Because again, I'm not saying rare items need to be common, and I'm not saying expensive costs need to be cheap. I'm simply saying the rare are too rare, and the expensive is too expensive. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, that's it. A little bit of rant, a little bit of focus on this. I think this version is fun. If you want to give it another try, shake it up and go for the crit meta, this is something you could do. And again, I'm not even sure this is necessarily better or worse. It's just this is what I'm working on. And when I post a video of clearing 100 with this, yes, I will post content, a video content of it this time. That's what you guys are going to see. So that's the update on what I'm working on now. It's giving me a reason to keep playing until seasons and try to do this. And yeah, that brings you guys up to speed. So to all of you that think I was carried by a druid, I would like to point out that druids were nerfed. They're the reason that they were clearing it, the toxic clause or whatever. If you check the where is it, the timestamp on this, I guess, oh, it doesn't have an actual timestamp. Shit, never mind, I'm wrong. I was gonna say if you check the timestamp you'll see that this actually procced after they had already made that nerf, but it doesn't actually show it down to the minute, so never mind. I'm a fat liar. I guess I can't check the timestamp. Never mind. Maybe I was carried by a druid. Damn, they got me dead to rights. So good luck, have fun with that. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'm always just trying to tweak, you know. I've been watching YouTube videos, I've been watching Twitch streams, I've been learning and studying and watching what everybody's up to with the build, and it's really fun to see you guys taking your own cracks at it and tweaking it and doing stuff with it. And this is just my for fun version of the crit build. So you know, I will continue to work on this. I will continue to make adjustments, and when I think I have the gear finalized and finished out, we'll take a look at whether or not it is also able to push 100, and I will make my own assessment as to whether or not I think it's better or worse for that purpose based on what I see. And there's another side thing. While it's not great, I also feel this is slightly better against Uber Lilith, which was another factor as far as the single target damage goes. I was trying to make this build more Uber Lilith capable. So when it's fully done and the damage is there and everything's in place, I will let you guys know just how smooth it feels like this plays against Uber Lilith. So that's all for now. I'll see you guys later. Have fun.